The grand ballroom of the Hartley estate shimmered under chandeliers crafted from imported Austrian crystal, their glow dancing across golden mirrors and polished marble floors. Classical music drifted from the quartet in the corner, and champagne. Flutes clinked gently in the hands of New York's finest designers, investors, journalists, and socialites, all invited to witness what had been described in the tabloids as the Hartley heiress unveiling. Evelyn Hartley stood by the large bay windows, her posture poised yet distant. She wore an ivory silk gown with a deep back and hand-beaded neckline, her own design. Her lips curled in a practiced smile as she accepted compliments, but her eyes frequently darted to the empty space near the grand staircase. Her father still hadn't arrived. Neither had Marcus Dodd. It was her night. It was supposed to be perfect. Her fingers toyed anxiously with the locket around her neck, a silver heart engraved with an E, a gift from her father when she turned 16. It was more than jewelry. It was memory, trust, protection, but tonight it felt like none of those things. Looking beautiful as always, came a familiar voice behind her. Evelyn turned. It was her Aunt Vivian, her father's younger sister. Elegantly dressed in emerald satin, Vivian exuded charm and grace with the exact precision of someone who had crafted herself from ambition and calculation. Her perfectly arched brows, her smooth, ageless face, it all shimmered with a bit too much polish. "Thank you, Aunt Viv," Evelyn said, forcing warmth into her voice. "I hope you're ready." Vivian smiled. "Big night. Big shoes. Big legacy." There was something else behind her smile, a flicker too tight, too sharp. Evelyn had noticed it more often lately. Ever since she returned from Paris, Vivian had grown closer to Henry, Evelyn's father, becoming increasingly involved in the company. Too involved. Evelyn felt it. A slow shift of power. "Have you seen Dad?" Evelyn asked. "He was supposed to be here an hour ago." "Oh, I'm sure he's just collecting his thoughts," Vivian replied with a too quick wave of her hand. "You know Henry, he likes dramatics." Evelyn nodded but didn't believe it. A sudden chill crawled up her spine. She moved through the corridors of the estate, heels echoing against the marble. Every step carried her closer to her father's study, a room he never let anyone enter during parties. The door was slightly ajar. "Dad," she called gently. Silence. She pushed it open. And the world stopped. Henry Hartley was slumped forward at his desk. The amber glow of his desk lamp flickered over his back. A shattered whiskey glass lay at the edge of a stack of papers soaked with liquid and blood. "Dad," she whispered, stepping forward, her voice trembling. She touched his shoulder. Cold. Too cold. His skin had turned a waxy shade of gray. His lips were parted, his eyes frozen open in shock. Evelyn screamed. The next few hours blurred into sirens, gasps, and questions. The police came. So did the press. They labeled it a heart attack at first, but whispers started that he looked poisoned. By morning, the autopsy confirmed it. He had been poisoned with a rare neurotoxin. Then the real nightmare began. Investigators found traces of the toxin in Evelyn's cosmetics lab, in one of the essential oil bottles she used to scent jewelry boxes. Evidence conveniently planted. She denied everything, begged them to believe her. Marcus, her fiancé, didn't defend her. He said little. When questioned, he admitted they had been arguing lately, that Evelyn had become unstable after returning from her European design program. And Vivian, she gave a soft, tearful press statement outside the estate. "We're praying for Evelyn. She's been under such strain since Henry's passing. We just want what's best for her. Mental health is very important." Days later, Evelyn was declared emotionally unfit to stand trial. She was admitted to the private wing of Rosewood Psychiatric Hospital, and then the final betrayal, a magazine cover. Engaged, Marcus Vane and Vivian Hartley announced their surprise union. Evelyn sat in the pale silence of her hospital room, staring at the article. Her hands no longer shook. Her heart didn't race. Something inside her had gone still. Cold Dot let them think she was broken. Let them think she was mad. They thought they had erased her. But all they did was give her time to wait, to plan, to become something else entirely. And so, Evelyn Hartley died that week, but something far more dangerous was born. Asterisk southern France. 2 years later, the dawn was quiet. The waves below the cliffs whispered in a steady rhythm, lulling the air into a strange sense of calm. The sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon, but the sky above the Quai d'Azur was already turning a soft gold. The villa, hidden by cypress trees and perched high above the sea, belonged to no one and everyone, leased under a fake name, funded by a web of trusts and shell companies, carefully constructed to erase all traces of the woman who lived within, Evelyn. Hartley had died 2 years ago. Now, there was only Eve Moreau. She stood at the edge of the terrace, barefoot, a thin silk robe wrapped around her tall frame. The wind tugged gently at her hair, now raven black, cropped just below the chin. The girl who once wore floral perfume and carried sketchbooks was long gone. Eve's eyes were sharp, lined with kohl, unmoved by the sunrise before her. She didn't need beauty anymore. She was the threat beneath it. Dot behind her. The French doors creaked open. Can't sleep. Dr. Adrian Blake stepped out onto the terrace, a tablet in one hand, coffee in the other. I stopped dreaming a long time ago, Eve replied, her voice calm. She turned to face him, the wind sweeping a lock of hair across her cheek. Adrian had known Evelyn before the transformation, back when she was sedated daily in a private wing of Rosewood Psychiatric Hospital, locked in a sterile room with 2 white walls and 2 silent nights. He had been the attending psychiatrist, fresh from his own private war with the system, and something about her case had unsettled him. The medication, the trial, the falsified psychological evaluations, the way Vivian had pulled strings too. Silence Evelyn, not just legally, but psychologically. She was not insane. She was inconvenient. And in the early weeks, Evelyn had truly been broken, staring out windows, muttering questions to no one, sometimes scratching lines into her skin just to remind herself that she was still real. But then came the silence. The clarity, the return of control. She stopped crying, stopped reacting, and started remembering. One night, she had looked him dead in the eye and whispered, "If I play dead long enough, will the wolves start to sleep?" That was the first moment Adrian feared her and respected her. A year later, they faked her death during a fire drill and used a surgical team to alter her face. Then they ran. She became Eve Moreau in a remote clinic in Switzerland. She learned the language of shadows. Business strategy, shell corporations, facial mimicry, voice control, psychological warfare. She trained herself not to react to her name, not to flinch at betrayal, not to feel the pangs of nostalgia. And now she was ready. Adrian handed her the tablet, Vivian's legacy. Collection flopped, he said. 2 of her PR accounts are in crisis mode. There's suspicion of plagiarism again. Critics are mocking the designs as derivative nostalgia dressed in desperation. Eve scrolled through the headlines, her expression unreadable. I told you, she has taste but no talent. She only succeeded because she stole other people's work, mine, my father's, our designers. Without someone to feed her, she starves. Adrian took a sip of his coffee. You could kill her career from here. You've already started. But that's not enough, Eve replied, voice like velvet over steel. I don't just want the empire she stole from me to fall. I want her to watch it collapse, piece by piece, with her name still stitched to the wreckage. She stepped back inside the villa, tossing the tablet onto a cream-colored sofa. The interior of the space was minimal but elegant, like Eve herself. Everything was soft texture and sharp lines. Besides, she added, ruin tastes better. When served in person, Adrian followed her in. So, the gala? Yes, she said. It's the perfect entrance, public, press-heavy, exclusive. Asterisk New York City, the Vivian Hartley Gala. 8:12 p.m., the city glittered like it had dressed for revenge. Outside the Hartley Museum of Design, camera flashes sparkled like lightning as a line of luxury cars pulled up along the black carpet. Paparazzi shouted names, journalists leaned over barricades, and PR agents murmured instructions into sleek Bluetooth earpieces. Inside, beneath vaulted ceilings and a $4 million glass chandelier, champagne flowed like water. The crowd was a blur of satin and silk, designer gowns, crisp tuxedos, and curated smiles. Every person in the room was either someone or desperately trying to look like someone. Vivian Hartley stood at the top of the grand staircase, one manicured hand holding a crystal coupe of Dom Perignon. Her green dress shimmered like serpentine, skin under the lights, and the necklace on her throat, an emerald-studded choker once belonging to her brother, gleamed like a crown she had stolen and polished. The queen of design herself, one reporter murmured. She hasn't aged a day, another whispered. Vivian smiled through it all. What none of them knew was that her empire was crumbling beneath her stilettos. Sales were slipping. Her latest collection had flopped. The board was starting too. Murmur and Marcus, her once prized financial weapon, had grown erratic. More vodka than numbers, but tonight she looked untouchable. That was the illusion she wore better than diamonds. Then came the arrival that no one expected. A woman stepped through the museum's towering doors, dressed in a floor-length gown of dark crimson velvet, fitted like second skin. The neckline plunged in a V shape, but it was the eyes that silenced the room. Cool, calculating, dangerous. She did not announce herself. She did not smile at the cameras, and she did not need to. Eve Moreau walked as if she owned the air. Vivian froze for a single heartbeat, long enough for a sip of champagne to go down quickly. She covered it with a cough, but Marcus beside her noticed. Viv? He asked, brow furrowed. I'm fine, she said quickly. Just dry throat. Eve's gaze swept the room once. She saw the sponsors, the critics, the media, the investors, and lastly, her targets, Vivian and Marcus, standing in the center like king and queen of the poisoned court. She approached with unhurried grace. Heads turned. People leaned in. Who was she? Who is she? Vivian hissed into her assistant's ear as Eve descended the stairs. No idea, the girl stammered. Not on the guest list. Must be a last-minute sponsor, or maybe press, Vivian's instinct screamed. But her training overrode it. She fixed her face into its usual calm charm and waited. Eve reached them. Vivian Hartley, she purred. A pleasure. I've admired your work for years, especially your earlier designs before the corporate delusion. The words were dipped in sweetness, but sharp as glass. Vivian forced a smile. Thank you. And you are? Eve Moreau, she replied, extending a gloved hand. I recently relocated from Geneva. I invest in beauty, whatever form it takes. Marcus stepped forward, already half drunk. Beauty finds beauty, apparently, Marcus feigned. Eve took his hand briefly, skin to skin, and leaned in slightly. Her lips barely moved, but her words struck like venom. Still using rose-scented. Soap, Marcus, she whispered. Just like you did when you lied to me the night my father died. His entire body stiffened. She pulled back before he could speak. Her face still elegant, untouched by the chaos she'd just ignited. Vivian noticed his reaction. What's wrong? She asked, lips barely moving. Nothing, Marcus muttered. Her voice is familiar. Eve smiled softly. Memory plays tricks, especially when you bury too many truths. She turned to walk away, slow, unhurried. But behind her, the ripple had already begun. He hesitated. Marcus will be there. Eve's eyes glinted. Good. You'll have to be careful, Adrian warned. He might recognize you. She smirked, a rare curve of her lips. Not unless he sees my soul. And I made sure to kill that part of me long ago. She disappeared into her dressing room. 20 minutes later, she returned, dressed in an all-black pantsuit, perfectly tailored, sleek, with a diamond-shaped slit at the neckline. She wore no jewelry except for one ring, a ruby on black gold. Her father's last gift, now redesigned and modernized. You look. Adrian searched for the word. Dangerous? She offered. Unforgettable, he corrected. She grabbed her phone, switched to her private network, and sent a single encrypted message to her New York contact. Subject, the Viper is coming. Message, Della, 3 weeks. Unleash the whispers. She shut the phone. Time to make noise. That evening on a private jet bound for New York, Eve sat reclined with a glass of untouched wine. Outside the window, clouds drifted like silent witnesses. Her reflection in the glass was still strange to her, not because of the changed face, but because of what lived behind it. She remembered the softness she once had, the girl who loved poetry, who sketched jewelry by candlelight, who believed that love meant loyalty. That girl had been murdered, not with poison or lies, but with betrayal. Vivian, Marcus, the board, the media, even the staff who used to call her Miss Evelyn with fondness. Every one of them had stood silent while she was dragged away in handcuffs and locked behind padded doors. No more silence. Now her voice would return, not as a whisper, but as a scalpel. She reached into her purse and took out an old photograph. It showed her and her father laughing on the yacht, a rare moment of innocence and love. She stared at it for several long seconds before sliding it back inside, along with a hand-stitched napkin embroidered with an H, a reminder of who she once was, and what they took from her. They buried Evelyn, she thought, but they forgot. Some things grow best in darkness. And as the city lights of New York flickered into view, Eve Moreau, the woman the world thought long dead, closed her eyes and whispered, "Let the game begin." Later that night, near the sculpture hall, Eve stood near a display of antique goldwork, a champagne flute in hand, untouched. She watched from a distance as Vivian and Marcus whispered in a corner, their shoulders tight with tension. Their confidence had cracks. A man approached. Simon Geller, CEO of a niche luxury watch brand, her ally in silence. She had funded him weeks ago, quietly, through a shadow corporation. "You lit the match," he said, glancing at Marcus. "I told you." Eve replied, eyes still on them. "They're not strong. They're stitched together with panic and pride. All it takes is one cut. And what next?" "We pull threads," Eve said, slowly. "Vivian's lead investor will receive an anonymous tip tomorrow morning about creative fraud. Marcus's travel logs will surface on tabloid forums, unexplainable weekend trips and secret bank accounts. And you?" Eve finally looked at him. Her voice was steel. "I stay close, but never visible enough to become a target. I'm not here to reclaim anything. I'm here to let them burn." Across the room, Marcus was sweating. He poured himself another drink, hand trembling. "Who the hell is she?" He whispered again. Vivian didn't answer because deep down she feared she already knew. The curve of her cheek, the glint in her eyes, the way she said his name. It was impossible. Evelyn was dead. Declared mentally unstable, committed, then disappeared during a fire. But something in her gut, that ancient survival instinct, whispered otherwise. "She's just another socialite trying to be relevant," Vivian said finally, snapping back into performance. "Forget her." But Marcus couldn't. Not after those words, not after that voice. Midnight. Outside the museum, the gala ended with applause and carefully timed flashes. Vivian had survived the night, or so she thought. Eve walked out alone into the cool Manhattan night. She declined her driver, instead slipping into a black town car that had been waiting around the corner. Adrian was inside, scrolling through his phone. "Well, she saw me," Eve said, and she flinched. Adrian chuckled. One flinch down, a kingdom to go. Eve looked out the window. They're beginning to feel the cold. Soon they'll know it's not the wind, it's me. 4 days after the gala. New York City, the boardroom of Hartley's Jewels. International was a temple of silent panic. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed a sweeping view of Manhattan's skyline. But no one was admiring the city this morning. The usual calm of quarterly meetings had been replaced by low murmurs, tight jaws, and darting glances at phones vibrating with alerts. Vivian Hartley sat at the head of the table in a cream Chanel suit, fingers laced, back straight. Her face was serene, composed. But beneath the table, her nails dug into her palm. The meeting had started with numbers, and they were bad. But what had truly shattered the room's calm was the email. An anonymous whistleblower had delivered a full document packet accusing Hartley's creative team, under Vivian's signature, of copying designs from a defunct Persian boutique. Along with it were side-by-side photos, timestamps, and internal memos. The press hadn't seen it yet. But the board had. "Vivian," said Robert Lynn, one of the more conservative investors. "We need clarity. Was your team aware of these similarities?" Vivian smiled, tight-lipped. "My team receives thousands of submissions. If someone on the junior staff borrowed without permission, I assure you it will be dealt with." "Borrowed?" someone muttered. Another cleared their throat, too loudly. Marcus sat 2 seats away, unusually silent. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, because he hadn't. He was haunted. Ever since the gala, the woman in velvet haunted his thoughts, her voice. That scent, vanilla and rose. That look in her eyes. He dreamed of Evelyn, of her standing in the fire, lips sewn shut, pointing at him. He didn't believe in ghosts, but something told him this wasn't about belief. This was about reckoning. "Marcus?" Vivian's voice cut through his fog. He jolted upright. "What? Do you have any update on the firm's offshore holdings?" "We've been asked to prepare documentation for next week's audit." His throat was dry. "Yes. Oh. I'll send them by end of day." She stared at him. She knew he was slipping. The moment the meeting ended, Vivian rose and exited without a word. But her heels clicked louder than usual. Her mask was still on, but there were cracks. That afternoon, Vivian's private office, the door shut behind her with a muted slam. She tossed her clutch onto the leather couch and ripped the emerald choker from her neck. Nearly tearing the clasp. She poured herself a drink. Bourbon, neat. She didn't usually drink during office hours, but today her hands were shaking. Who was behind the email? How did they get those files? And why now? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. "Your crown looks heavy. Perhaps it's time someone relieved you of it." Vivian dropped the glass. It shattered, liquor spilling like amber blood across the carpet. She stood there for several seconds, breathing hard. Then she called security. "Find out who accessed our server in the last 2 weeks. Every file, every log. I want names, now." Meanwhile, Soho, a private cafe, stirred her espresso slowly, watching the foam swirl into a perfect spiral. Across from her sat Simon Geller, her planted ally in the luxury trade circuit. Next to him was Elena Voss, editor of a fast-rising fashion blog with a taste for scandal and takedowns. "She's unraveling," Simon said. "Half her board is sniffing for blood. The other half's preparing knives." Eve sipped. "Good. Let them fight each other first. Elena leaned in. I'll need a green light to post what we talked about. The photo comparisons, timeline data, design theft accusations. You sure you want the first wave public? Do it, Eve said coldly. Not enough to destroy her, just enough to make her bleed. I want them to circle her, not kill her, not yet. Understood. Elena nodded. Eve opened her phone and tapped into her secure app. Phase 2, internal collapse, activated. That night, a memory in the dark, Eve returned to her penthouse suite and drew the curtains shut. She had moved to New York under the alias Eve Moreau, claiming to be a French investor in rare design collectibles. No one suspected a thing. Her social media was curated, her record spotless. Her face altered just enough. She stood in front of the mirror, removed her earrings, her gloves, the ring. Then her gaze locked on a black velvet box, hidden behind a row of perfumes. Inside was a gold lapel pin, shaped like a rose. Faded now, edges dulled. It once belonged to the head butler of the Hartley estate, Charles Alden, a man loyal to Evelyn's father and one of the few who had tried to protect her. He had been fired the day after. Evelyn was taken to Rosewood. Vivian claimed he interfered in legal proceedings. But now he was back. He had reached out to Eve under the codename Rosekeeper, delivering key documents and a full list of staff Vivian had bribed or silenced. He knew the house, the safes, the old passwords. She picked up the pin, ran her thumb over it. You weren't alone, Evelyn, he had told her when they first spoke again. We just didn't know how to save you. But now you lead. We follow. She would. And they would. The next morning, Marcus's apartment. Marcus woke to the sound of his front door slamming open. Vivian stormed into the apartment like a thundercloud in heels. You told her, didn't you? She hissed. Told who what? He asked gradually. Still in a wrinkled dress shirt? That woman. That thing at the gala. I saw your face when she spoke to you. Marcus sat up slowly, his voice hoarse. I don't know who she is, but you recognized her. I thought I did, he snapped. But it's impossible. Evelyn is dead. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Is she? They stared at each other. Vivian's expression shifted from suspicion to something more dangerous, fear. If Evelyn was alive, everything was at risk. Everything. Asterisk location. Hartley Estate, midnight, the Zoos. Mansion on the edge of Westchester County still looked like a painting. Ivy clung to its gray stone walls, the fountain still ran, and the garden paths curved in perfect symmetry. But beauty, Eve knew, was often a coffin. She had lived here for 23 years. She had been locked inside it. 2. Now, after 2. Years of being declared insane, dead, forgotten, she had returned, but not through the front door. Security patrols the front every 35 minutes, whispered Charles Alden, crouching beside her behind a row of hedges. Same 2. Guards, easy to time. The basement delivery doors, unmonitored, still coded. You kept the code. Eve whispered, half amused. I was the one who programmed it, Charles replied with a dry smile. Vivian's never once changed it. Arrogant people rarely expect ghosts to return. She gave him a look of gratitude Alden had once brought. Her warm milk during nights of insomnia. He had guarded the study door when her father was in meetings. He had taught her to tie a real Windsor knot. No, he was helping her break into the house he once served. Eve pulled on black gloves, slipped a compact earpiece into her ear, and followed Charles along the stone path. Every step felt like walking through memory, broken glass embedded in silk. The back garden was eerily still. Statues lined the hedges, their faces pale in the moonlight, half turned like silent witnesses. The basement door opened with a soft click. They slipped inside. Inside the mansion. Scent hit her first. Old wood, wax, the faintest trace of her father's favorite cologne still, clinging to the shadows. Eve paused. She looked around. and for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. The grandfather clock still ticked in the hallway. The mahogany paneling gleamed under antique sconces. A painting of the Hartley crest still hung above the main stairwell, but beneath that surface, something had changed. Vivian's taste, new. Furniture, colder colors, oversized portraits of herself in fashion campaigns. The house had been remodeled to erase Evelyn's ghost. She would bring it back. Study first, Charles whispered. That's where the real documents were always kept, not the safe room Vivian parades around to guess. They moved silently through the lower corridor. At the end stood a door Evelyn once wasn't allowed to enter after 9 p.m. Her father's private study, the brass handle turned without resistance dot inside. The room was untouched, dark green wallpaper, floor-to-ceiling books. A whiskey decanter on the sideboard, dusted but unopened. Her father's leather chair sat behind the desk, just as it had on the night he died. Eve walked forward slowly. Her fingers brushed the desk surface, the edge where her father's hand had once gripped, where his final breath had stopped. Charles reached for the bookshelf and tapped. A small bronze lever hidden behind the Merchant of Venice, with a soft hiss. The central section of the bookcase popped open, revealing a hidden compartment inside, an old manila folder tied with red string, a leather-bound notebook, and a key engraved with the Hartley crest. Charles handed her the notebook first. She opened. Inside were her father's notes, written in his tight, slanted hand, cataloging meetings, concerns, personal observations. The final pages were the most damning. Vivian pushing for full rights to launch new brand. Once 40% control, denied. Evelyn must inherit majority. Only she understands vision. Marcus. Suspicious. Too close to Vivian. Watch them. Arguing in library after dinner. I've rewritten will. Evelyn gets 62%. Rest divided among trusted board. Vivian removed entirely. Tears welled in Eve's eyes. But she blinked them back. Her father had protected her. She hadn't imagined his love. They had simply buried it beneath lies, beneath forged documents, beneath a fake diagnosis. Where's the original will? She asked that Charles open the manila folder. Inside was a notarized copy, dated just a week before her father's death. Signed, Henry Arthur Hartley witnessed, Charles Alden, Elise Donovan, housekeeper, stamped and sealed. This version was never submitted, Charles said. Vivian submitted an earlier one, forged or at best outdated. After they committed, no one questioned it. Eve held the will in her hands. This was more than paper. This was the match. And Vivian had just handed her the gasoline 2 years ago. They took everything. Now Eve would take it back, piece by piece, starting with the truth. Elsewhere, Marcus Vane's private office, Midtown Marcus hadn't slept. Again, the whiskey. On his desk was untouched, which was rare. His laptop glowed with a dozen tabs open, business records, name registries, photo analysis tools. He didn't trust Vivian anymore. She was hiding something. And so was the woman from the gala. Uploaded the only photo he had of Eve Morel, a blurry shot taken from the gala live stream. Then he pulled up an eye facial comparison tool. Input, Evelyn Hartley from press archives. Cross-reference with Eve Moreau. Processing. Result. 84% match facial structure consistent with post-operative reconstruction. Marcus leaned back, heart pounding. She was alive. Evelyn. Or someone who wanted him to know she was alive. He stared at her photo for a long time. I didn't kill him. He whispered aloud, as if trying to convince someone. I didn't poison Henry. I didn't know Vivian would do that. But guilt didn't care about direct actions. He had let it happen, and now she was back. Back at the Hartley estate. 3:14 a.m. Eve and Charles returned everything to its place. But before leaving the study, Eve reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a gold earring. Her earring, the one she had been wearing the night her father died. She placed it under the leg of the leather chair, just enough out of sight, but visible to anyone who might clean thoroughly. A whisper from the past. She would let Vivian find it, let her wonder, let the walls close in before the fire began. Location, Midtown Manhattan, Marcus Vane's apartment. The first thing Marcus did when he woke up was check his phone. No texts, no missed calls. Just the open browser tab from the night before minus 84% match. Evelyn Hartley, Eve Moreau. It wasn't just probability, it was certainty. And if the woman from the gala was Evelyn, then everything he'd buried was beginning to rise. He couldn't stay silent anymore. 10:12 a.m. Hartley Corporation Tower. Vivian sat behind her curved desk, flipping through reports. She wore a pale lavender blouse and diamond-studded earrings. Soft, controlled, beautiful. Like a blade hidden in silked-out. Marcus entered without knocking. "You lied to me," he said. Vivian didn't even glance up. "You'll have to be more specific, Evelyn. She's alive." That made her look up. "Careful," she said, voice low. "Paranoia makes you sloppy. I ran her through facial recognition." "There's no doubt. And if she is alive?" Vivian asked, voice icy. "What exactly do you think she wants?" "Justice," he said, "or revenge." Vivian stood and crossed the room slowly. Her heels clicked like a countdown. She was locked away for being unstable. She signed herself out during a fire and vanished. If she's alive, Marcus, that doesn't make her innocent. It makes her calculating. She's not the one who poisoned Henry. Vivian froze, just for a second. "And neither are you," she said smoothly, almost sympathetically. "That's why you're still breathing." The air between them chilled. Marcus swallowed hard. "If she exposes you, she won't," Vivian cut in, "because now we know she's watching. And if she's watching, we can find her." She tapped her desk twice. A second later, her assistant walked in and handed her a file. "Private investigator. Discreet. He'll start with the gala guest list. Find everyone Eve Moreau spoke to, every shadow she'd left behind." Marcus looked at the file, then back at her. "You're going to war," he said. Vivian smiled. "I've been at war since the day Henry wrote her name in his will instead of mine." That evening, Tribeca private lounge low lighting. Jazz piano. Red Wine. Eve sat in a private booth in the back corner, watching the crowd through a delicate black veil hat, the kind worn by widows and spies. Across from her sat Julian Ward. He hadn't changed much in 2 years. Same deep-set eyes. Same. Sharp jaw, same hands, once stained with paint, now clean and calloused from woodwork. He had been a rising sculptor when they first met, and once he had loved Evelyn Hartley like she was light in the dark. He didn't know she had died. He didn't know she had returned. He only knew the woman in front of him now as Eve Moreau. "Art investor and collector? Still no last name?" he asked, teasing lightly. She smiled. "A little mystery never hurt anyone, unless they're hiding something." She raised her wine glass. "Aren't we all?" Julian studied her closely. "I have to say, you remind me of someone." She met his gaze. "Someone you lost?" She asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "She died 2 years ago. Or she disappeared. They said she went insane, but I never believed it. Evelyn Hartley. We were close. What happened?" Eve asked. Softly. "She trusted the wrong people. And they took everything. Her father, her freedom, her voice." Eve's fingers tightened on her glass. "You loved her?" she said. Julian smiled, sad. "I still do." She set her glass down. "Maybe she's not gone," she said. "Maybe she's watching, waiting. Why would she wait?" Eve's eyes darkened. "To learn who deserves to know her again?" And who doesn't? Julian studied her again, longer this time. And for the first time, a flicker of recognition passed across his face. Not quite certainty, not quite memory, but something close. He reached for her hand, and for just a moment, Eve let him. Then she stood. It was nice seeing you, Mr. Ward, but I don't believe in ghosts. She left him in the booth, staring after her with 1,000 questions he couldn't quite put into words. Midnight, Marcus's apartment, he was drinking again. Not to forget, but to remember. His memories of Evelyn were too clean, too neat. A girl in ivory, a girl who smiled. A girl who loved him, but that wasn't the full truth. The real. Evelyn was stronger, smarter, and now, colder. He opened his laptop and played the only clip of Eve Moreau walking across the gala floor. He turned the volume up, froze on her eyes. Still using rose-scented soap, Marcus? She had whispered that like it was a secret weapon. Only Evelyn knew that. Only she had said that on the night they first kissed. 5 years ago, she was alive, and she was coming for them all. He stood up, grabbed his keys, and headed out. He needed answers. And not from Vivian. He needed to find Charles Alden, the only man who had ever stood between Evelyn and destruction, and now, maybe the only one who could save her from herself. Meanwhile, Eve's penthouse Eve stood in front of the window, watching the city below. Her gloves were off. Her ring was off. The notebook from her father sat open on the table. And beside it, the original will, the one they buried. She touched the page lightly. The room was silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the quiet sound of her voice, repeating a phrase her father once told her. Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. And sometimes what it reveals is poison and velvet. She looked down at her reflection in the glass. Evelyn Hartley was gone. But Eve Moreau? She had only just begun. Location, Brooklyn, Charles Alden's workshop. The scent of wood shavings and varnish filled the air, mingling with the soft click of old clock gears ticking somewhere in the background. In a quiet corner of Brooklyn, Charles Alden lived like a man in exile, retired, invisible, but never idle. Marcus Vane stood at the threshold of the workshop, one hand clenched into a fist, the other gripping a folded photograph, Evelyn's photograph. Charles looked up from his workbench, eyes narrowing behind his spectacles. You shouldn't be here, he said calmly. I need answers, Marcus said. And I think you're the only man left who isn't lying. Charles wiped his hands, nodded once, and motioned toward the worn mother chair near the corner. I swore I'd never speak of it, he said, sitting down across from Marcus. But I suppose the time for silence has passed. He reached beneath the table and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside it were old keys, a tarnished fountain pen, and a photograph. Evelyn, at age 15, sketching quietly beside her father's desk. She wasn't mad, Charles said. She wasn't dangerous, she was brilliant. And she loved harder than anyone I've ever seen. Marcus swallowed, his throat tight. Then why didn't you stop it? Why didn't I? Because we all believed Vivian was the safer choice, Charles replied. You let yourself believe she would run the company. I convinced myself Evelyn would survive the betrayal. He looked Marcus dead in the eye. But we were wrong. We didn't just betray her. We buried her. Marcus leaned forward. She's back. Charles didn't blink. Good. I want to help her. Charles snorted. Do you? Or do you just want to be forgiven? Marcus didn't answer because he didn't know. Meanwhile, Hartley Estate, Westchester Vivian stood in front of the security monitor. Frame was grainy, night vision green, but the shape was unmistakable. A woman in black, slipping through the garden at 3:14 a.m., no face. No sound, but the silhouette, the movement. Vivian's hand trembled slightly. She zoomed in. Paused the frame. A single gloved hand rested on the antique stone railing, where Evelyn used to sit on spring mornings, barefoot, humming Brahms, and sipping tea. She clenched her jaw. The woman hadn't stolen anything, hadn't vandalized, but she had left something. Later that day, the housekeeper found it beneath the leather chair in the study, a gold earring, old, familiar. Vivian held it now in her palm, staring at it like it might sprout thorns. "She wants me to know," she whispered. Downtown Manhattan, black glass Capitol offices, the office of Alaric Sterling overlooked the Hudson River. Sleek, ruthless, and charming in equal parts, Alaric had once been Henry Hartley's closest ally and the silent investor behind the original Hartley expansion into Europe. But after Henry's death, Vivian had frozen Alaric out, quietly, politely, permanently. Now, he sat across from Eve Moreau, entirely unaware of who she truly was. "I heard you've been collecting distressed luxury assets," Alaric said, sipping whiskey at noon like it was water. "I prefer to think of it as restoring fallen empires," Eve replied smoothly. "You built one yourself. You understand the value of legacy and the cost of betrayal," Alaric chuckled. "And what exactly are you offering me, Miss Moreau?" Eve leaned forward, her voice lowered. "I'm offering you a chance to correct the mistake you made when you let Vivian Hartley take your place in this city." He tilted his head. "I didn't let her. She stole it. Then take it back," Eve said. "Invest in me. Let me get her company from the inside out. You'll have naming rights over the remains." Alaric studied her carefully. "You play a dangerous game," he said. "There's something about you familiar," Eve smiled. "I've been underestimated before. It was educational." He lifted his glass. "You have my attention." She clinked her glass against his. "Good. That's where all revolutions begin." Later that night, Vivian's penthouse, she was pacing. The earring burned in her palm like a brand. Her investigator had traced Eve Moreau's paper trail, and it was too clean. Swiss addresses, French IDs, no birth record, no family. Nothing prior to 2 years ago. A ghost with a forged name. Vivian opened her safe, pulling out a hidden folder marked E. Inside were newspaper clippings, psychological reports, court documents. And at the bottom, a death certificate. Evelyn Hartley, presumed deceased. Date April 4th, cause psychiatric fire. She stared at the form. "If you're alive," she murmured, "you'll wish you stayed dead." Meanwhile, Eve's penthouse, Tribeca Charles, arrived at midnight. He handed her a NUSB drive, the last copy, he said, "of the surveillance footage from the night your father died. I saved it off the internal server. Vivian thought it was destroyed." Eve plugged it into her laptop. The grainy footage played. It showed Vivian entering Henry's study with a glass of wine. 10 minutes later, he collapsed. Vivian didn't call for help immediately. She waited, watched, removed something from the desk drawer, then finally screamed. Eve's face didn't move. "I knew," she whispered. "But now the world will too." Charles hesitated. "There's one more thing." He handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, a letter, hand-written. "To my daughter, Evelyn. If you find this, it means I failed to protect you in time. But you are stronger than them, smarter, and more worthy of this legacy than anyone I've ever known. Trust your instincts. Reclaim your name. Burn what needs burning. I love you." Always. Father, her hands trembled for the first time in months, but her eyes remained dry. She looked at Charles. "Tomorrow," she said, "we begin." Location, New York City, early morning. The city never truly slept. But today, the heartbeat of Manhattan pulsed faster, louder, as if the very streets whispered secrets too dangerous to ignore. Eve sat in her penthouse, the glow of her laptop casting sharp shadows across her face. The grainy footage played on a loop. Every second etched deep into her mind. Vivian entering her father's study that fatal night. The poison poured silently into the wine glass, the slow collapse of Henry Hartley. She exhaled slowly and clicked send. The video zipped through encrypted channels, finding its way to an anonymous investigative reporter known only as the Raven, a ghost in the city's media landscape who specialized in unmasking the powerful 730. Hartley Corporation lobby news broke like a bombshell. Screens in the lobby flickered with the leaked footage. The whispers started low, but quickly grew into a roar. Executives gathered in small, tense clusters, their faces pale. Phones buzzed nonstop. The Wall Street Journal headline read, Hartley, Scandal, Poison, Power, and the Forgotten Heiress. Vivian arrived, perfectly poised, her heels clicking like a metronome. Cameras swarmed her as she stepped inside. Double quotes, Miss Hartley. Do you have a comment on the leaked footage? A reporter demanded. Vivian's smile was thin and cold. I am as shocked as anyone. This is clearly an act of sabotage by someone with a vendetta against me and the company. We will cooperate fully with authorities to uncover the source. Her words were precise, but the room saw the cracks. Marcus's office, 8:15 a.m. Marcus watched the news feed. Heart hammering. The woman on the screen, Eve Moreau, was now the face of the rebellion, the truth teller. The ghost who had become a storm. He dialed a number. Charles, he said when the butler answered, we need to meet now. Midday, a quiet cafe near Central Park. Marcus sat across from Charles Alden, his expression torn between hope and guilt. She's playing a dangerous game, Marcus said, but it's the only way to cut through Vivian's lies. Charles nodded. She has the truth, and sometimes that's all you need. Evening, Eve's penthouse. Eve watched the media frenzy with a detached satisfaction. But beneath the calm, her mind raced. Her phone buzzed. A message from Julian Ward. Are you sure you want to do this? This could destroy everything, including us. She typed back quickly. Some truths demand fire. We survive or burn. Her eyes lingered on the city lights. For a moment, the mask slipped, revealing a flicker of the woman Evelyn once was. Late night, Marcus's apartment. Marcus paced, conflicted. He'd loved Evelyn. Or had he loved the idea of her? And now, standing before Eve, was he falling for the woman she had become or the ghost she hid behind? His phone rang. It was Eve. Meet me, her voice whispered. He hesitated, then said, I'll come. Midnight. Rooftop overlooking the city. The wind was cold. Eve stood with her back to the skyline. Marcus approached cautiously. You're Evelyn, he said softly. I know it. She turned, eyes shimmering in the moonlight. Yes, she said. But Evelyn died the night they took everything from me. What you see now is what came after. He stepped closer, uncertain. Why? He asked. Why come back now? To reclaim what's mine, she said. To expose the venom beneath the velvet. Marcus reached for her hand, trembling. Then, let's burn it all down, together. Asterisk location, New York City, early morning. The city was a battlefield, but no one had drawn first blood yet. Instead, the tension simmered, like embers glowing beneath a thick blanket of ash ready to ignite at the slightest spark. Eve sat at her desk in the dim light of her penthouse, planning her next move. The original will, the damning footage. And Charles Alden's unwavering loyalty had given her the fire she needed, but the war was far from over. 6:30. Vivian's penthouse. Vivian stood by the window, watching the city wake below. The news of the leaked footage had shaken the company and damaged her carefully constructed empire. Her phone buzzed. A message from her private investigator, Keller. Eve Moreau's movements tracked. She frequents Julian Ward's gallery and a safe house near Tribeca. Vivian's lips curled into a cruel smile. Prepare the arrangements, she whispered. 9 a.m. Julian Ward's art gallery. Soho Julian adjusted a sculpture as Eve entered, her presence commanding yet fragile. Eve, he greeted cautiously. We need to talk. She nodded, sensing the storm beneath his calm voice. I know who you are, Julian said. Not just Eve Moreau, but Evelyn Hartley. Her eyes flickered, but she remained silent. You lied to me, he continued, pain thick in his voice. I love the girl I thought you were. Eve stepped closer, voice low. I never lied about who I was. I survived. Julian ran a hand through his hair. And what about us? Was that real? More real than anything I had after, she replied, her gaze unwavering. Before he could respond, a knock interrupted them. 2 men in suits entered. Keller, one whispered to Vivian on a phone call. Watching from a surveillance feed, 11 o'clock. Marcus's apartment. Marcus paced as his phone rang incessantly. The looming threat against Eve was clear, but his resolve only hardened. He picked up the phone. Eve, you need to be careful. She answered calmly. I've been careful for too long. I'm meeting Charles tonight, Marcus said. We need to finalize a plan. Vivian is escalating. Eve's voice was fierce. Then let her come. We're ready. Midnight, safe house. Tribeca Eve met with Charles and Marcus around a cluttered table. We have to cut Vivian's support, Charles said. Her board is divided, but she still holds most of the power, Marcus nodded. Alaric Sterling is on our side, but he's cautious. We need proof that Vivian manipulated the board. Eve pulled out the letter from her father. This and the video are only the beginning. Charles added, I've also secured additional files, emails, transactions tying Vivian to bribery and cover-ups. They devised a plan to leak these documents incrementally, eroding Vivian's credibility piece by piece. Meanwhile, Vivian's strategy room. Vivian sat across from Keller and a hired assassin named Dante. You want Evelyn found, she said. I want her dead, Keller nodded. We have eyes on her every move. Dante cracked his knuckles. Soon, the city's shadow will swallow her whole. The next day, gallery confrontation as Julian escorted Eve through the gallery. 2 suited men trailed them. Suddenly, Dante appeared, blocking their path. Julian stepped protectively in front of Eve. What do you want? Dante smiled coldly. She's a threat to the Hartley legacy. Before a fight could break out, Eve whispered to Julian, trust me. With swift precision, she used a small device to trigger the fire alarm. Chaos erupted. Amid the confusion, Eve slipped away while Marcus arrived, alerted by an anonymous tip. Late night, rooftop escape. Eve met Marcus on the rooftop, breathless but unscathed. They're closing in faster than we thought, she said. Marcus clenched his fists. Then, we burn brighter. They looked out over the city, danger and destiny intertwined in the night sky. Location, New York City Press Conference Hall. The room buzzed with anticipation. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and the air hung heavy with expectation. This was no ordinary press conference. It was a reckoning. Eve stood behind the podium, her expression calm but fierce. Beside her, Marcus and Charles flanked her like silent sentinels. The original well, the damning footage, and stacks of documents were neatly arranged on the table. Opening statements. Eve adjusted the microphone. Good afternoon. I am Evelyn Hartley, the rightful heir to the Hartley legacy. For too long, the truth has been buried beneath lies, betrayal, and greed. Today, I am here to reclaim what was stolen from me and to expose those who conspired against my family and me. The room erupted with murmurs and flashes. Marcus stepped forward. We stand here not to destroy, but to restore justice. These documents prove a web of deceit orchestrated by Vivian Hartley. Forgery, bribery, and even conspiracy to commit murder. Charles nodded, voice steady. As a longtime servant of the Hartley family, I can attest to the truth of these claims. Media. Frenzy reporters fired questions rapidly. Miss Hartley, what do you say to those who claim this is a vendetta? Mr. Vane, how do you respond to accusations of collusion? Miss Hartley, is there evidence that implicates Vivian in your father's death? Eve answered with unwavering poise. I did not come here for vengeance. I came for justice. And yes, the evidence will speak for itself. Vivian's retaliation across town. Vivian watched the live stream, lips pressed tight. Her assistant whispered urgent news. The board is fracturing. Several investors are pulling out. But Vivian was not defeated. She had one final card. She released her own statement, a meticulously crafted narrative portraying Eve as unstable, dangerous, and driven by revenge. Leaked documents accusing Marcus of shady dealings surfaced simultaneously, shaking his credibility. Marcus's doubts backstage. Marcus's phone buzzed incessantly. The accusations hit hard. He looked at Eve, searching for reassurance. She met. His gaze. Stay focused. This is their last defense. But doubt gnawed at him. He wondered, was Eve using him? Was this fight truly about justice or something darker? Julian's choice. Julian watched the chaos unfold on his screen. The woman he loved, or thought he loved, was in the eye of the storm. He reached a decision. He called Eve. I know. Everything now, he said softly. The truth, the lies. I want to help, but I need to know. Can I trust you? Eve smiled faintly. Trust is earned. But right now, I need you. The turning point as night fell. The city held its breath. Eve, Marcus, Charles, and Julian gathered in a dimly lit room. United by fragile trust and shared purpose, we're not just fighting for a legacy. Eve said, we're fighting for truth, for every lie buried in velvet. Tonight, we rise from ashes. The phoenix was no longer a symbol, it was their reality. Asterisk. Location, New York City, Hartley Corporation headquarters. The war had moved beyond the boardrooms and whispers. It was now in the open, raw, ruthless, and unforgiving. Eve stood in the glass-walled conference room facing Vivian across the table. Around them, the remaining board members watched, divided and tense. The battle begins. Vivian's voice was ice. You think you can walk back into my world and destroy everything I built? You're delusional? Eve's eyes burned. This isn't just about what you built. It's about what you stole, my father's legacy in my life. Vivian smiled coldly. Your father was weak. I was the one who kept this company alive. Marcus stepped forward. Your greed almost killed it and him. Secrets unveiled. Charles Alden cleared his throat and produced a sealed envelope. This, he said, contains evidence no one expected. Eve opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, old, grainy, yet unmistakable. A much younger Henry. Hartley with a woman unknown to anyone in the room, holding a baby. Who is she? A board member demanded. That, Eve said slowly, is my half-sister. Born from a secret my father kept even from me. Gasps echoed. Vivian's composure cracked. That child was a mistake. Vivian spat. A threat to our family's name. Fractures and alliances. Julian stepped forward. This changes everything. The Hartley legacy isn't as pure as you claim. Marcus turned to Eve. Are you ready for what this means? For the consequences? Eve nodded. I have no choice. The final blow. Vivian's face twisted with fury. If you think this will save you, you're wrong. I have allies, people who owe me. Suddenly, security guards entered the room. Miss Hartley, you're under arrest for corporate fraud, obstruction of justice, and more, the lead officer announced. Eve's heart thundered, the cliffhanger as. Officers moved toward Eve. Marcus blocked their path. This isn't over. he said, voice low. Vivian smirked. Oh, but it is. For you? The room fell silent. Eve looked at Marcus, Julian, and Charles, her last allies. The fight had become. Survival. Location, Manhattan Courthouse. Morning. The courtroom was filled with a tense hush. Reporters and spectators packed the gallery, cameras clicking incessantly. Eve sat at the defendant's table, her expression stoic despite the storm raging. Around her the charges were heavy: corporate fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Charges born from Vivian's machinations, a final, desperate attempt to crush the woman who threatened everything she had built. Opening statements. The prosecutor laid out the case with cold precision, painting Eve as a manipulative outsider, bent on vengeance. But Marcus, sitting across from her, was ready. His jaw tightened, eyes blazing with determination. Julian watched from the gallery, his heart torn between hope and fear. Behind the scenes, outside the courtroom, Marcus met with their legal team and Charles. We need evidence to prove Vivian's deception, Marcus said. The forged documents, the hidden communications. Charles handed over a folder thick with emails, wire transfers, and confidential memos. These show her attempts to silence dissent and manipulate board members. The turning point in court, Marcus took the stand. He detailed Vivian's schemes, exposing the lengths she went to maintain power. Julian appeared as a surprise witness, revealing Eve's true identity as Evelyn Hartley and sharing his testimony about the betrayals she suffered. The courtroom murmured. The verdict. After days of testimony and cross-examinations, the judge returned with the verdict. Vivian was found guilty on multiple counts. Eve was exonerated. Justice had been served, but the cost was high. Aftermath. Eve stepped outside the courthouse, the sun warm on her face. Marcus and Julian flanked her, silent but supportive. She held the original will tightly. The past is ashes, she said softly, but from ashes we rise. Asterisk location, Hartley Corporation, morning. The city was waking up, but for Eve Hartley, it felt like a rebirth. The courtroom battles were over, and those scars remained. The path ahead gleamed with promise. She stood by the window of her new office, sleek, minimalistic, yet commanding. Below, the bustling streets of Manhattan stretched out like veins feeding the city's heart. Rebuilding the empire. Marcus entered, carrying a stack of reports and a hopeful smile. Ready to turn the page? He asked. Eve nodded. This is just the beginning. Together, they began outlining plans, restructuring the company, repairing broken alliances, and rebuilding trust with investors. The legacy of the Hartley name demanded more than survival. It demanded greatness. Julian arrived, carrying sculptures and blueprints for a new art gallery within the Hartley Tower. I want to help create something beautiful, he said, eyes shining. Not just a business, but a legacy of art and culture. Eve smiled. You always saw the world differently. I'm glad you're here. Their bond deepened, weaving between past pain and future hope. Shadows of the past, but even as they celebrated small victories, shadows lurked. A mysterious figure watched from a distance, someone from the Hartley family's darkest secrets, Vivian's. Defeat had not ended the game. Unexpected visitor one afternoon, a well-dressed man appeared at Eve's door. I'm Gabriel Monroe, he said, voice smooth but unreadable. I represent interests that may concern you and your enemies. Eve studied him carefully. Then perhaps it's time we talked, she replied, a fragile peace as the sun set over the city skyline. Eve, Marcus, and Julian stood together on the rooftop, a quiet promise hanging in the air. The battle had scarred them, but it had also forged unbreakable bonds. The dawn of a new era had arrived. Asterisk. Location, Hartley Corporation, evening. The glow from the city lights filtered through the tall glass windows. casting long shadows across Eve's office. Gabriel Monroe sat across from her, his calm demeanor belying the storm of information he was about to unleash. Gabriel's warning, Miss Hartley. Gabriel began, his voice smooth but serious. The battles you've fought so far are only the surface. Beneath it lies a network, powerful, ruthless, and deeply embedded in the financial world. Eve leaned forward, eyes sharp. What kind of network? Money laundering, insider trading, political bribery, and worse. The Hartley family, for all its legacy, has ties you haven't seen. Dark connections your father tried to shield. You from Hidden Files. Gabriel slid a sleek tablet across the table, revealing encrypted files, coded messages, and shadowy photographs. This, he said, is the veil of secrets your family wore to survive. But now it threatens to suffocate everything you're rebuilding. Eve's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the documents. Names she recognized and some she didn't. Deals made in backrooms. Alliances forged in darkness. The price of truth. Why tell me this? Eve asked, suspicion flickering. Because you're the only one with the power to change it, Gabriel replied. But change comes at a price. Allies will become enemies. Trust will shatter. Marcus entered quietly, overhearing the last part. We faced betrayal before, he said firmly. We're ready. Gabriel smiled faintly. Good, because the real fight begins now. Unseen threats outside, unknown eyes watched the Hartley Tower tracking movements, waiting for a sign. Vivian's fall had created a vacuum, and in the shadows, new players moved, hungry to claim the throne. Preparing for where Eve gathered Marcus, Julian, Charles, and now Gabriel. Together, they planned their next steps, decrypting files, exposing hidden enemies, and protecting the Hartley legacy from being swallowed by the darkness. The veil of secrets was lifting, and with it, a new war loomed. Location, Hartley Corporation. Late night, the war outside was nothing compared to the battles within. The room, once a sanctuary for trust and alliance, now echoed with whispered doubts and unspoken fears. Eve sat at the head of the table, eyes scanning the faces of Marcus, Julian, Charles, and Gabriel. Each carried their own secrets, and now shadows grew between them. Seeds of doubt. Marcus leaned forward, voice tense. Gabriel, your files are invaluable. But how do we know you're not leading us into a trap? You appeared out of nowhere. Gabriel's calm facade flickered for a moment. I understand your caution. But if I wanted to betray you, I wouldn't be here explaining things. Julian glanced sideways at Marcus. We all have to watch our backs, especially when the enemy is inside as well as outside. Charles sighed, rubbing his temples. We've been betrayed before. We can't afford to be blind again. A hidden agenda later, Eve caught Gabriel alone in the hallway. Why did you really come? She asked, voice low. Gabriel met her gaze evenly. Because my past is tied to your family more than you realize. I'm not just an ally, I'm a legacy bearer too. Eve's brow furrowed. Explain. Gabriel hesitated, then said, I was once promised a place at Hartley's table, but when Vivian took control, I was pushed out, left in the dark. Cracks in the alliance. That night, Julian confronted Marcus privately. Do you trust Gabriel? Julian asked, eyes sharp. Marcus shook his head. Not entirely. But right now, we need all the help we can get. Julian's jaw tightened. Help can come with a price. The betrayal weeks passed, and the team made progress until an insider leak jeopardized their plans. Confidential documents found their way to Vivian's loyalists. Eve's heart sank. One evening, Marcus stormed into the room. It's Gabriel, he accused. He's been feeding them information. Gabriel denied it fiercely, but the seed of doubt had taken root. Confrontation. Eve demanded a meeting. Show me the proof. She said. Marcus presented emails, coded messages traced back to Gabriel's devices. Gabriel's face hardened. I did what I had to do to protect myself and ensure the Hartley name survived. Eve's voice was cold. Your survival cost us everything. Aftermath, the group fractured. Trust shattered like glass. Eve stood alone, staring out at the city lights. In this game of shadows and secrets, some bonds were meant to break, but the fight for truth was far from over. Location, New York City. Various, the betrayal of Gabriel. Monroe had shattered the fragile alliance Eve had painstakingly built. The room where strategies were once laid with hope now reeked of suspicion and silence. The once unbreakable team was now fractured, and Vivian's shadow loomed larger than ever. Rebuilding amid ruins, Eve sat alone in her office, fingers trembling over the papers. The leak had set them back months, and worse, the public's trust was wavering. Marcus entered quietly. We need to keep moving. The truth is on our side, but only if we stand together. Eve nodded, exhaustion lining her face. I'm tired of shadows. We need light, a new alliance, someone unexpected. The return of an old ally. Julian reappeared at Eve's doorstep, his eyes carrying a mixture of hope and urgency. There's someone who owes Vivian a debt, someone she betrayed. He wants in. Eve raised an eyebrow. Who? Julian smiled. Meet Malcolm Shaw, a former financier turned whistleblower. He knows Vivian's deepest secrets. Malcolm's entry. Shaw's arrival electrified the group. His insider knowledge was invaluable. Names, dates, illicit transactions that painted Vivian as the puppeteer she truly was. Together, they forged a new plan, a final strike to dismantle Vivian's empire and expose her to the world. Vivian's. Desperation as cracks appeared in her defenses. Vivian grew reckless. She lashed out, targeting Eve's closest allies with threats and attacks. One night, Eve narrowly escaped an attempt on her life, a chilling reminder that the war was far from over. Final confrontation. The climax unfolded in a high-stakes corporate summit where Eve presented incontrovertible evidence against Vivian. Under the public and legal spotlight, Vivian's empire crumbled. In a final, bitter exchange, Eve confronted Vivian privately. You lost because you built your kingdom on lies. Vivian hissed. And you'll lose everything trying to build yours on revenge. Resolution and new beginnings. Months later, the dust settled. Eve reclaimed her place as head of the Hartley Corporation, but with a renewed vision, one rooted in integrity and transparency. Marcus and Eve's partnership deepened, their bond forged in the fires of battle. Julian's art gallery flourished, a testament to beauty rising from chaos. Eve looked out over the city skyline, a city reborn just like her.